So today's session, thanks for joining in today's session. I've got Olayinka and obviously Omar with me on the session. What I want to do is basically in the next couple of minutes, discuss some of the things which are going to be leading on to what we covered in the first session on research for strategic managers. Now, we looked at the basic techniques of why research is done, how research is done, and what are the key things in terms of the 6-step or the 7-step cycle that we looked at in terms of research. Does anybody remember in terms of what we discussed last time? So just for the benefit of recapping, what we basically looked at was in terms of the reason why we do a bit of a study or an investigative study is primarily to understand what are the issues and problems being faced, how your investigative study will actually, or systematic steps in terms of investigation will actually bring out the problems. And once you know the problems, what you're going to do is structure it in a 6 or 7-step process through which you will study that problem. And once you know that problem, we will try and arrive at a conclusion or some sort of solution. Now, what we did last time was basically look at understanding the overview of the whole unit and why research as a process is quite important as an activity, be it any industry, any sector, any department, and why research is undertaken. So if we look at marketing, for example, a lot of companies would undertake research to try and find out consumer preferences. They would look at, finding out maybe details about their competitors. Some of them could be looking at finding out, gap areas in terms of product lineup. So there are lots of things because of which research is done. Now, in terms of the research that we understood, what we did was the overview of the whole process, and that was a 7-step process. So we went through some of the slides which basically described how we look at arriving at a problem or identification of the problem. From there, we will go to understanding existing situation and the parameters which create those issues. So that is nothing but literature review of the current situation. And at some stage, what we do is we form some objectives, or aims and objectives or goals, and why do we need to do this study, and what our study will actually help in solving or resolving. And that is done in the formulation of some sort of hypothesis that combines things like you creating aims, objective, goals, looking at the way how would you carry out research, and then we look at when we actually get into it, we look at the whole process of how data will be collected, whether you will do it through interviews, whether you will do it through surveys, or we'll look at case studies. And then once we collect all that data, you do analysis. And after the analysis is done, triangulate the data collected with your aims and objectives and test your study. And that study, when it is tested, eventually will give us our end results in terms of conclusions. And that is at some stage what we do is we kind of present it out as recommendations and findings for the research. Now that is what we went through in the last session. Now, this is the last session. What I did was I had requested most of you to basically look at firming up some sort of a proposal or a study that you will undertake for this module, because this module will continue for 6 to 8 weeks. We will only do some brief overviews of what research is and the process is, and the idea of doing some of the sessions was to try and take you through the various things in terms of the various activities which are actually involved in the research process. So broadly, I also emailed you some examples of a research proposal, and they were primarily done for you to get some idea in terms of how you could look at framing up something of your own in terms of having to pick up an area of research or an area of study, essentially, rather than me using the word research, which is again the words that we can use interchangeably are things like investigative study or a study or an area that you want to look at to solve some problems. Now, in terms, I know, Olayinka, were you able to look at any particular topic or area that you want to pick up in your place of work, which you could look at doing a study on?
Yes, I was able to get some topics. I'm trying to collate everything together to see how I can send them to you.
Right. Okay.
But I'm working on it.
Well, that's great. So I think in terms of the discussion going further, what I would do is I'll just point you in the direction wherein we had I'd uploaded, I think, 1 or 2 sample research proposals along with an overview of the presentation which was covered in the last session. So what I want to do is basically there were 2 sample research proposals which I had uploaded, and that is what I would want you to look at. I know Omar sent me something across, so what I don't want to do is discuss it in this session, but I know he sent something across and I've given him a bit of feedback in terms of proceeding further. So this is an example of a proposal wherein you pick up a topic of study, you do some introduction in terms of explaining why you want to do this research, and that is slightly expanded into picking up something called what is the research issue. So Omar, I know that you've drafted a proposal which is in the form which we want. It is more or less okay, but I think you'll have to just tidy it up slightly so that it has those dedicated headings which kind of match the assignment brief which is given.
Okay.
Is that okay? So what is the research issue? We need to narrow down, after talking broadly about the industry or the company or the issue being faced, into one specific issue that we want to look at. And why is this an issue we need to cover? So, and the reason why we look at why it an issue is because this is something that you will pick specifically to do that investigative study. And then to a certain extent, what you do is you define a bit of a rationale in terms of how you would carry out the study. And that rationale would be basically giving me some sort of an outline, talking about, that your, say, for example, how you would go about essentially doing the study. That would mean that, you're looking at maybe collecting data from surveys or doing questionnaires. Your data of collection would be primary data or secondary data. And then to a certain extent, we are talking about things like, once you've collected it, how you would kind of present that data, graphs or, some advanced statistical techniques, whether you're presenting it through Excel workbook, graph, Google Forms, and, presenting it in a way wherein it makes meaningful sense. So this was another example in which the research and objectives were kindly, clearly stated, that why you want to undertake a study to understand the toy industry manufacturing in China. And then the idea is you develop this further. So my suggestion at this stage would be, to go through these 2 sample proposals, pick up some of the broad areas, and the email which I sent across wherein I kind of segmented clearly that what does research objectives cover, why do we do a literature review, what is the research design and methodology. These are the main headings that we need to look at primarily because that is how, the assignment is structured from ATHE. So the idea is remaining very close to what has been given in the assignment brief so that whatever work we are putting together is going to be hitting that criteria specifically task by task. So when we look at the aims objective, it covers it straight away. Formulation of research proposal that you've done, you've created a research proposal, and that is going to be the first few pages of your report, the first 1 or 2 pages of your report. Now, the title actually, relates to your area of research, which is the company and the sector and the problem that you picked up, which is the problem of communication, as an example. And then what we have to do at some stage would be to present some sort of a plan of how we would go ahead and basically do the research. And this plan typically talks about, a timeline essentially. And just to give you an idea of a timeline, whenever we do research, what we do is we create a timeline like this. It says selecting a topic is done in the first week. We do a literature review in the second week so that you're collecting all the various published articles, studies, existing data which is available in that domain, and then you kind of put it together into some sort of a summary. and that is review of existing situation. Then you look at identification of methods, and data collection. So this is like a timeline, which essentially allows you to look at following the research and completing it about, say, in 7 to 8 weeks. And that would then cover the first task of your assignment. Is that clear so far?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, in the second part, we get into a bit of detail. So because we've selected a topic which I approve, because I don't want you to pick up a narrow, very broad topic. Like, for example, I want to study, the consumer preferences for Nestle as a brand. Now, Nestle as a company or Unilever as a company has 200 brands. So it is going to be too big a study for you to be able to complete with respect to level 7 and the time frame that we have. So what we want to do is rephrase that title into study the impact of consumer preferences for Mars bar, a case study of Nestle. So what we have done is we picked up an industry, which is we've picked up a company, which is Nestle, and within Nestle, we've picked up one product, which is called Mars bar. So that is narrowing down the topic to a state wherein we are able to study it and complete it in a time frame of 7 to 8 weeks. Is that okay? So the idea of doing this as a project would be that when we do some of these activities, it will become a combined document, but you're also hitting all the criteria which the task is asking you to do. Fine?
Yeah, fine.
Omar, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm good.
Is it clear enough?
Yes, it's clear.
Now, what I want to do is basically, rather than take you through a slide, because I think what I want to do is basically run you through a few slides to make you understand once we've covered the basic bits, like, there are 5 basic elements of how to do research. The first part was overview. The second part is we are talking about research, not research, literature review. Why do we do a literature review? The third part is going to be something which talks about research methodology. The fourth is going to be looking at data collection and analysis. And the last part is going to be recommendations, conclusions, and limitations for research. So what I want to do today is, rather than going to the theoretical bit, we want to look at, because in the proposal you want to clearly highlight how would you go about collecting data. So this presentation is what we want to look at is, we want to understand what are the 2 types of data collection methods, quantitative and qualitative, right? The 2 words give it away. Quantitative means it is more of fact-based, preferences-based, or, published studies. Quantitative means numbers. That means you're going to go by and rely on facts, figures, and numbers. Now, this particular presentation is what I'm going to do is actually send it to you in the email, and my suggestion would be to go through these 10 to 12 slides to understand the differences between the 2 types of data. Now, when you pick up research, now both of you are working, right? Now, so there might be physically not much time available with you to be able to go out into the market and get questionnaires or surveys filled. So the modern way that we get it done through is we use something called Google Forms or SurveyMonkey as one of the options to send the questionnaires out to the friends, family members, peers, colleagues in the office, to ask them to fill up the research or, participate in the research by giving some inputs in terms of filling the questionnaire. Now, when you do that, you typically tend to come across with some sort of a research strategy. That research strategy would be, how would you do the research? Will it be desk-based? That means you're going to go to secondary research, or is it going to be field-based, which is going to be primary research? So primary research involves experiments, surveys, case study, questionnaires, and desk-based research involves, when you collect data or basically review or collect data from journals, published articles, websites, books, or existing studies which are already available in that domain. Now, before that, what we do is, once you know that how your data is going to be collected, then at that stage, we decide whether we are going to go down the route of qualitative data or quantitative data. And that is a key bit to understand in the research that we do. This unit, this is 50% of your understanding. How do we do research? Why do we do it in a particular way, which is called the research strategy? And when you've chosen that and you collected data, whether you go for primary data quantitative, that means you're looking at quantity, that means number of questionnaires, sample size, how many people will you contact to get data, and the other will be qualitative, that means you do in-depth interviews, focus groups to be able to collect data and then find out from their experience the problems and then write it in your own words. So this bit is something that we need to clearly understand, and that is why I'm going to suggest that you go through this particular presentation which I sent you today, and then come back. We'll have our discussion on this next week. Okay? And this will give you some idea very clearly in terms of why do we go down one of the routes, either quality or quantity. Because at level 7, we are expected to understand how primary research is done. Secondary research normally is required at level 4, 5 and up to your undergraduate degree level. But at the master's level or master's diploma level, we need to be very clear in terms of these techniques of how data collected from primary route is to be analyzed and presented in the research. So at level 7, we are going to be looking at primary research, until you are very time constrained and you cannot do that through the route of Google Forms and surveys. And then once you've collected data, how do you apply advanced statistical techniques like SPSS or using forms and these things to collect data to analyze it and present it very professionally. Okay. So what I would suggest, because this is something which has to be done practically, I can primarily give you a bit of an overview, but these are things that you have to have a grasp of in terms of concepts. And this can be done if you refer to 2 documents which I've sent across. One of the documents that we've developed over the years is a very detailed research project workbook. And this, I would suggest that you need to start reading and then firm up your proposal. So basically here it gives you everything, step by step of how you need to pick up a topic, what are the things that you need to look at. And my suggestion is if you read this first before we go into any more details of looking at, research methodology, literature review, and analysis. Okay? Now, Omar, have you gone through this workshop manual book that I've sent you?
Yes. No, actually, I have gone through the slides you have sent me, but this workbook I will this week.
Right. So my suggestion to both you and Olayinka will be, I know this is quite an extensive workbook, but what my suggestion to you would be, if you read the first 14 pages, because you're trying to do the research proposal, start with the introduction, come to the proposal, and this proposal is going to be, the reason I'm paying a bit of an emphasis on this workbook is that I think both of you are going to be doing the MBA top-up. So at some stage, this will be directly relating to the dissertation that you will do in your MBA top-up.
Okay.
Right. So it is good if you do a thorough study on this particular module and follow this format which has been specified in the workbook. And a miniature of that is going to be utilized to complete and meet the assignment criteria for the ATHE diploma level.
Okay.
So my suggestion will be read the first 14 pages and then look at some of these guidelines to firm up a 2-page proposal like you've done, Omar. Olayinka, I would suggest that you do that maybe in this week and then send it over. And what I'm going to then do is take you through the literature review and the research methodology in the next session.
Okay.
Is that okay? So today's session, I'm going to stop here. It's going to be a brief one. The reason is what I want to be able to do is make a start from the place wherein I've received the proposal. So in the case of Omar, for example, I've received something already. And what I want to be able to do is, just to show you, Olayinka, just as an example, because Omar sent a proposal very briefly. It is, in the format and the shape that we need. But what we need to do is do a bit of fine tuning. So the research proposal is rightly prepared it from a point of view that there's a defined topic, slightly amendment on the topic needs to be done. He's done a bit of an introduction. He's defined what is the problem. There are generally problems with companies in Saudi Arabia wherein communication creates issues. He's defined that further by again saying what and why, which is very good. Then how is he going to go about doing the research? And he's given some sort of a flow chart in terms of why this is important. The bits that he's missed out, which I've given in the feedback, is research methodology and the aims and objective of why do you want to do this study. That is the bit which is important, which is missing, but otherwise the proposal is pretty much, in a shape or form, which is acceptable, and I think is an area which is a good area that you picked up, and that would be a project if you are able to complete this. So in this topic, how you overcome communication lack in between strategic business units, I just rephrased it as investigate the importance of various communication techniques in facility management business. A case study of a company, a particular company. Now, apart from that, these areas are okay, and I've said, okay, add some research aims and objectives, and this could be like you to identify potential communication issues within the department. So let's identify what are the issues first. And once we've identified the core issues, 3, 4, we need to identify what are the factors which are affecting communication in the department or in the company. And once you've done that, your objective of the research would be to find out those issues, the factors which create those issues, and how would you resolve them for the company. And that is your final objective of how to make recommendations on how to adopt better communication system and techniques to improve, within the company. And then how do we do it is nothing but research methodology, which is fine. Here, what we have to do is basically look at the approach. And the approach is either going to go by desk-based or, live that we do, so deductive and inductive. And research strategy would be you're going to collect data through case studies, surveys, questionnaires, how would you do it? And then it will be primary or secondary. And within primary and secondary, whether you're going to do analysis through quantitative techniques or qualitative techniques. And the bit that I can mention in this is that some references have to be put so that you know you are referencing or which company is it and where you are getting the data from in the proposal. Is that okay, Omar?
Yes, sir, but if I can name a dummy company, that will be okay?
That will be fine. That will be fine. I said XYZ company, and you can just have a name of a company. It does not need to be specific, because sometimes if you want to do a research in a particular company's name, they might not allow you to come in and collect data. So you just look at a dummy company name so that at least it is there from a point of view of understanding.
Okay, so in that case, we will not need for the references, right?
No, we can see references wise. What I would suggest is we have provided a few books that you can refer to from a point of view of collecting research data. So there are a few things that you need to study, but references will have to be brought in when you do literature review, where you are getting most of this data from, and those references will have to be put into the bibliography.
Okay.
Okay. So for today, what I'm going to do is send you some sort of an email which kind of briefly outlines just what is required in the research proposal. A copy of this presentation which talks about, the quantitative and qualitative techniques that you could go through. And if you haven't received this workshop manual, which is on Moodle, but I will include it in the email for you to at least go through the first, I think my suggestion would be to look at least firming up, so we don't want to go to research strategy, but yeah, you could look at something like, I would say page up to research objectives. So, page 19 is what I would suggest you need to study. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
Any questions on this, Oleyanka?
Well, with the one you have sent earlier on, the research proposal, I will on my topic, and maybe over the weekend I send that to you.
Yep.
So far so good. I'm fine.
Okay, that's great. And any questions from you, Omar?
No, I am fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. So if there are any questions, feel free to drop me an email. If you are not able to follow, or maybe if you are struggling on a particular topic or something, then feel free, ask me questions. No problem, ask me 10 times. Ask me silly questions, stupid questions. I don't mind. If you want to see a research project, how it is, how it will go about, I can also send you something like that for you to have a look at. But I think it's important for you at this stage, like Omar, you've identified a problem, which is an absolute genuine problem, which we do get to see in companies which are family-led businesses. But at a stage when they grow big, there are these issues and problems which they have in terms of communication, delegation, and these are important issues. So it's a very good topic that you picked up. But ask me questions if you are getting stuck anywhere, so that my idea would be to try and direct you to the assignment brief, so that anything that we are doing at this stage would be meeting the criteria, and you are not looking at digressing from or doing a very granular study, which will be not accomplishable or completable in the next 6 to 8 weeks. Okay, good stuff. So if there are no further questions, what I would do is I would end this session here today, and I'll immediately follow it up with an email that I will send you with some of these additional documents for you to read through, and then we'll catch up same time next week.
Okay, fine.
Okay, thank you, Olayinka. Thank you, Omar.
Okay, well, like you said, we'll keep, when I have questions, I'll send you mails and see how it.
Absolutely fine. Absolutely fine.
Thank you.